Everyone knows it takes goals to win in the NHL. Just how many?
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Flames. I am your host, Nick Zararis, on my second month of full-time co-hosting. Usual co-host Jess Belmosto still does not have a voice, so hopefully Jess is feeling better by tomorrow, Thursday, and we can tackle a show with two people. But before we get into today's episode, gotta remind everyone, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Today's episode, very straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about the math problem that is winning in the NHL. We reduce it down to how many goals do you need to score to win in today's NHL per game over the course of an entire season, at even strength, at 5-on-5, what type of shooting, what range of shooting percentage you need to be in to be successful. A whole lot to talk about, so let's dive in. Big picture. The idea for this episode is very straightforward. If you are familiar with the film Moneyball, there's the scene where Jonah Hill's Peter Brand, the real person Peter Brand is portraying, his name is Paul DePodesta. I believe he's with the Cleveland Browns of the NFL now in their front office, but he confronts Brad Pitt's portrayal of Billy Beane in the parking garage after Billy had tried to make a trade with the then Cleveland Indians for an outfielder and then a reliever, and they both got rebuffed. And Jonah Hill looks at Brad Pitt and says, "There's a fundamental misunderstanding in the sport. People are too busy trying to buy names and players as opposed to trying to buy wins. How do you win in baseball? You score more runs than the other team. For the purposes of our conversation, you need to score more goals than the other team." What do we know about goal scoring as a concept in the NHL? For the most part, our basic understanding, if you see the corner of my eye darting over, I've got hockey on just to keep an eye on things. You never know what's going to happen. But from a drop-down perspective, what we understand about offense, we know that puck possession, we know that scoring chances, we know that quality scoring chances, those have strong correlations to winning hockey games. Possession can be loosely defined as controlling the puck in the other team's offensive zone. You hear me say this all the time. The best defense in today's NHL, which is so fast and so hyper-skilled, is to not have to play defense at all. At some point, you are going to have to play defense, and that's something we're going to talk about in a little bit, where teams that are really good at controlling possession, that they do struggle defensively. There are a few teams that come to mind with that idea, but that's your ideal game state. You want to be in the other team's offensive zone for extended periods of time. You want to control the puck. You want to put pressure on their defense. You want to force them to take a penalty, or you want to score a goal. Those are the ideal outcomes from sustained offensive zone time. As far as the paths to sustained offensive zone time, we typically classify offense in two categories. You can be a rush team, or you can be a forecheck team. A rush team, they're teams that are going to try and skate past the defenders in the neutral zone with possession of the puck, gain the zone with speed, not lose possession at any point, and then try and distribute off of that zone entry. Rush teams typically are going to create their scoring chance within 2-3 seconds of gaining the offensive zone, because it's about catching the defense and the goalies out of position, catching them off balance, and really trying to seize the opportunity you have by using your speed. There are a lot of teams that are able to be successful with that mentality. Teams like Colorado have been successful for a long time using tempo. The Dallas Stars, the Edmonton Oilers, the New Jersey Devils in years past, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Teams that have really high-end players are going to utilize this style of play because it's where their star players are going to be able to differentiate themselves the most. The reason Connor McDavid is so special, other than the counting stats, is his ability to bob and weave through traffic, to gain the zone with speed, and maintain possession the entire time. When you do the opposite, when you're a dump and chase and forecheck team, you have to concede possession. Sure, the other team doesn't immediately get possession when you dump the puck into the offensive zone, goes around the boards behind their net, but you do have to go back and get it. You do have to go back and forecheck and pressure the other team and try and win that puck back. Strategy is a means of breaking up a team that's really rigid in its structure. If a team is really adamant about holding three guys on their own blue line and defending and forcing you to dump it in, that's what you have to do. You can't try and skate around teams that are going to drop three onto their own goal line. You just can't. The math doesn't work. The space doesn't work. Fundamentally, structure in sport is about using your numbers to manipulate the other team. You align a 1-3-1 where you're dropping guys back. That is to make the other team dump the puck in. You're going to tell your defenseman, all right, turn around. They don't have possession. Win the foot race. Get the puck back. Let's try and get out of the zone quickly. That's the fundamental idea. Now, in an ideal world, you're going to have a little bit of both. The Avalanche, when they won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, did a really good job of this. Vegas last year did a really good job of this. Tampa Bay, in both of their years, did a really good job of this. St. Louis in 2019 did a real good job of this, having a little bit of both. And in an ideal world, your top six is going to be your rush guys, and your bottom six are going to be your forecheckers. And this is where you can really differentiate yourself amongst playoff opposition, is with your depth. If your third, your fourth lines have the ability to cycle the other team in their own zone, and they don't even need to generate a lot of offense, just zone time. If your third line is out there, and the Flames can do this, the Flames do this, where Backlund, Coleman, and Mangiapane will go out there, the three of them will cycle the other team into oblivion for 45 seconds to a minute and a half. They might get one or two scoring chances. It puts pressure on the defense. It alleviates pressure on your own defense. That's the ideal outcome from your starting point. And how can the Flames get to where they need to be? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes in the next segment. And I went and did the math and where they are, where they need to be. You'll remember coming into this season, we said the Flames were probably going to need something in the ballpark of 20 to 30 additional goals than they scored last season if they were going to make the playoffs last year. Because when you go and pull up the stats for the 2022-2023 season, the Calgary Flames scored 258 goals. That was 19th in the NHL last season. Teams ahead of them that did not make the playoffs include the St. Louis Blues, the Ottawa Senators, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres, no goaltending, bad defense. The Vancouver Canucks, a lot of goal scoring, bad defense, poor goaltending. The Penguins, old, mediocre goaltending, bad defense. The Blues, old. The Senators, bad. Those teams ahead of them makes a little bit of sense, especially in the case of Vancouver and Buffalo. Tage Thompson, had the crazy season last year where he scored all those goals. He's come back down to earth since then. But right now, the Flames are currently on pace, and I wrote this down in my notes here. The Flames are currently on pace for something in the ballpark of exactly what they had last year. They, more likely than not, are going to end up finishing with something close to 250 goals. That is not a significantly impressive number. The median average in the NHL last season was 258. The median average in the NHL this season, not median, average. I shouldn't have said median average. That's not proper English. But right now, the league average team has played 75 games and they're at 230 goals. Teams are going to end up with around 258, 57, something in that range is going to be your league average for this year. And the Flames are going to finish below that pace. The Flames are going to finish at 248, 249, 250 if they maintain their current average. And the reason you can't really count on the Flames to maintain their current average is that they don't play as well as they did for earlier stretches of the season. They don't have Lindholm anymore. They don't have Zadorov anymore. And yes, I know you'll laugh about Zadorov, but he did help control possession. Tanev, Hanifin. When you trade away four guys from your teams your rate stats are going to take a nosedive. So we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about the Flames, their goal scoring distribution, if they've overachieved or underachieved relative to their chance creation, and a whole lot more. But first, we are going to take a quick break and talk about our friends at Gametime. You know me. If you're a regular Locked On Flames listener, I am always out and about, whether it's baseball, if it's hockey, if it's football. This weekend, I will be at WrestleMania in Philadelphia. Buying tickets is not a absolute nuisance, but not if you are talking about our friends over at Gametime. The thing I love about Gametime, two things that really make it stand out. Number one, the augmented reality feature that'll show you your exact view from where you're sitting. So if you're going to a concert, a game, a show, and you're going to an older venue that doesn't have the best sight lines, you'll know if the section that's on the level above you is in front of you. Like if you go to Madison Square Garden, or if you're going to an event at Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum, like I did last year, and the ceiling is concaved and dives down, which blocks part of your view as well. And the other thing, no surprise fees. The price you see is the price you pay. All-in pricing is great. In addition, it is time to take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Want to thank everyone who's hanging out on this Wednesday evening when this episode goes live as I hold it down. And before we move on over to my handy dandy Calgary Flames scoring spreadsheet, I do want to ask anyone, you watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. So, I like to break offense down into its raw components. You want to think about, well, are you a power play team? Are you a 5-on-5 team? Are you a little bit of both? Are you a goaltending team? What's your path to victory? What's your formula? How many ways can you get there? Most teams are going to operate on a tripod mentality. Goaltending, special teams, 5-on-5. Those are the three legs of your tripod. If you get league average goaltending and then a power play goal, or a really strong penalty kill game, like a 5-for-5 or 4-for-5, you can make up for not being that good at 5-on-5. Or if you're a strong 5-on-5 team, because you have a lot of depth, think about a team like the Kraken last year, a lot of depth, but no real high-end talent that's really going to be able to exploit the advantages of a power play. That's where it starts to become, you have to start consolidating your talent. You have to start thinking about what's the most logical path and what's going to give you the most options. I feel like that's something we kind of lose sight of in these conversations when we're talking about how teams play and their styles. What is your path to victory? So I'm looking over here at my spreadsheet. The Calgary Flames this year have 180 goals at even strength, I should say, not 5-on-5, because that's how it's categorized. And I'm going to double check here. We're going to scroll down. The Calgary Flames are at 181 and 93 at even strength, according to Natural Stat Trick, which is in direct conflict with the notes I had from Hockey Reference. So I do think I want to say that's probably going to end up being a miscount somewhere on someone's end. I don't know whose end, because That's really weird because when it comes to stuff like that, like it's not like expected goals or anything where it varies model to model. Oh, I was looking at the wrong thing. Don't mind me. Don't mind me. Both are at 180. Yes. The Flames have 185 on 5 goals. That's 18th in the NHL this season. Teams that are not in playoff spots at this exact moment as of this recording who are ahead of the Flames. Detroit is not in a playoff spot. Ottawa, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, none of those teams are currently in a playoff spot, and they are ahead of the Flames. That means the Flames are on the periphery. Just like last year, they're going to finish with only a handful of teams ahead of them as far as goals. The Flames got decent goaltending this year. I know the save percentage and the goals against average aren't very friendly, but when you look at Jacob Markstrom's workload, the quality of competition, the expectations he has had, and how often he has been the deciding factor in the games the Flames have won because he's been able to steal goals here and there to keep them in games, that is important. So if we're talking about the numbers, we're going to say an NHL team 258 is the average in all situations. So that's even strength 5-on-5 and special teams. Okay. You add all of those up. 258 is the average. The Flames are on pace to finish about 249, 250. If you want to get to average, which would be 258, which would only put you exactly in the middle. 258 would put you exactly in the middle. And you're going to need to leapfrog at least 3 or 4 of the teams in front of you if you want a realistic chance to make the postseason. How can the Flames leapfrog the teams ahead of them? I'm glad you asked. So let's start with what they already have in-house. Of the 258 goals they've scored of the 180 even strength goals they have scored this season, you have to subtract Noah Hanifin's 8, Elias Lindholm's 5, Tanev's 1, and Zadorov's 1. That's 15. So what you're going to do, you're going to take that Flames number of 227 goals they've scored so far. They're on pace for 250 point something. So we'll say 250 for the purposes of a nice even round number. So that would be a handful. So they have 7 games remaining. We're talking about 3-ish goals per game on average to get them to that 250. We're going to say 250, and then we're going to subtract Hanifin's 8, that's 242. We're going to subtract Lindholm's 5, that's 237. Tanev's 1 and Zadorov's 1, it's 235. The Flames at 235 at the end, going into next season, that's their starting point. Coming into this season, we thought if the Flames were going to make the playoffs, they would need to find an additional 20 to 30 goals over the course of an entire season, and they were going to need to make up for losing Tyler Toffoli's 30. So conservatively, we can estimate the Flames are going to need something in the ballpark, probably 30 more goals over the course of an entire season, in addition to what they currently have if they want to be a playoff team right now. And that's a lot. There are not that many guys in the NHL who score 30 goals in a season. That doesn't sound like a particularly big number. I know 30 goals does not seem like that much. It really doesn't. But then you very quickly realize just how few guys score 30. I pulled up Hockey Reference right now. As of this moment, there are 32 players in the NHL who have at least 30. There are a handful of guys like Blake Coleman, Seth Jarvis, Wyatt Johnston, Dylan Larkin, Connor McDavid, Sharon Govich, Rope Hintz, Jared McCann. I could go on and on. There are a lot of guys who are in the ballpark that can get to 30 with a good final 2 weeks of the regular season. But we're talking about less than 100 players in the entire league. So more likely than not, the Flames are not going to add a single guy who's going to make up that 30-goal deficit. It's going to have to be an aggregate approach. It's going to have to be a couple of guys having an uptick in their production, or guys who weren't on the team this year adding goals to the mix to make up for the ones they've lost and to make up the deficit behind the teams that are ahead of them. But before we talk about how the Flames might be able to close that gap and who might be able to fill that gap, we got to take one more break. We are in the great stretch of the sports calendar. We have got the final 2 weeks of the NHL regular season. We have got the NBA regular season winding down. We have got the Masters on deck. We have got the NFL draft at the end of April. We've got regular season baseball. We've got both motorsports. We are in the best stretch of the sports calendar. And don't forget, we got the Final Four this weekend, friends. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or on a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, teasers. You can even pick a future and pick which Final Four team you like the best. Just visit FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON and bet on college hoops until they crown a national champion. Hello, and welcome to the final segment of Locked On Flames, where we've been discussing the gap between the Flames in just terms of raw goal scoring and the playoffs. They are, the last 2 seasons, they're one of the teams that's been right there on the periphery. They're not that many goals off over the course of an entire season. You know, we're talking about something in the ballpark of 30 to 40 goals if they want to comfortably be a playoff team. 30 to 40 goals over the course of an entire 82-game season. We're talking about one more goal every other game. We're talking about one more goal every 2 games. Obviously, averages, you can make it out a lot of different ways. You score 8 goals in 1 game and then nothing in the 2, but your average over the 2 is 4, and that would help you make up the difference between 30 and 40. But for the purposes of this conversation, you look at their goal scorers. Kadri, 17 even strength. Sharon Govich, 21. Blake Coleman, 22. Mackenzie Weegar, 16. Michael Backlund, 11. Michael Backlund, 12. Andrew Mangiapane, 11. Connor Zary, 11. And those are all of the Flames that made it to double digits. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players who made 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't count live on air. Word of advice to you out there if you have to do anything with live audio. But 7 players reaching double figures. You're going to need more. Yeah, you need more. A playoff team generally is going to have at least 10 guys in double digits. That includes forwards and defensemen. If you're a good team, you're going to have 7 or 8 guys with more than 15. I know that sounds like a lot. And when you look at some of these totals, especially with the shooting percentages, Kadri's 17 on 10% shooting. That's reasonable. I think he can probably push that number again, not too much. Sharon Govich probably won't score 20 again next year. 17.8% is really high. I know he's been a streaky shooter in years past. I know his career average is relatively high for somebody who doesn't really profile as a pure sniper. I mean, his career average is 14.2, and this year he's at 17.8. He's not somebody who just shot a lot in previous stops. So I think that number probably comes down a smidge, and he's back under that 20-goal mark. Coleman, 22, 16.3%. I don't think Blake Coleman is going to be consistently a guy you can bank on to score 20 unless you're going to play him where in the lineup he is with the Flames. So if Blake Coleman and Sharon Govich are close to 20 again, that probably means the Flames didn't fill out their roster and they didn't push to compete and they gave younger guys an opportunity. You look at somebody like Weegar, 16. That's one of the higher totals amongst defensemen in the NHL. At 9%, you feel reasonably good at that. Mackenzie Weegar's a decent enough shooting talent as a defenseman. You look at Huberdeau, who only has 7 even strength goals, 8.8 shooting percentage. That has room. He might be able to get to 10. That's one where you might be able to chalk 3 out of that 30 we're looking for. Michael Backlund at 12. He's probably going to be somewhere between 12 and 15 over the final 2 years of this contract. So that's about right. Mangiapane you would like more from. Just point blank. I like Mangiapane a lot. One of my favorite players on the Flames. He's only got 13 goals this season. He had 30 a couple years ago. I don't know if the shooting talent is there, if the volume of offense is there for him to hit 20 again. But if the Flames are going to make up that deficit and get themselves back into the playoff mix, Mangiapane's the type of guy who needs to play better. Rasmus Andersson, I don't know. Defensemen are a little bit harder to profile because they don't take as good of shots, and their shooting percentages are naturally going to be lower than forwards because they're taking poorer shots. But I feel like you might be able to get 10 out of him in a career year. Lindholm, we don't have to count. Zary should be able to give you 11 to 15 again. Zary should be comfortably able to give you 11 to 15 goals at 5-on-5, and then he should be able to give you another 1 or 2 on the power play. Zary is somebody who has room to improve that can help make up that 30 to 40 goal deficit. Pospisil, he should be able to get you 10. Anything more than 10 from Pospisil is gravy. Kuzmenko, I don't know what his plan is long term, but he's played about 30 games, a little less than 30 games. I want to say he's at 27 if I remember correctly. He is at 21, excuse me. He's at 7 goals in 21 games. So if we scale that out, he's a goal every third game. There are 82 games in a regular season. That would be a 24 goal mark for the entire season. That will help make up your 30-something goals you need to make the playoffs. Kuzmenko is a guy. I know he's shooting 24% on those 7 goals. I know he's missed time. I know he hasn't played as much as you would like him to over the last month and a half since he got here. But that's a guy who has room. That's a guy who can be 20 goals easy. That's not going to make up your entire deficit, but he can help you chip away at it. And this is the issue. Once you get past Kuzmenko in the goal-scoring ledger, it's not guys who are going to make up the deficit. It's Greer, it's Ruzicka, it's Walker Dewar, it's Dennis Gilbert, it's Dryden Hunt. Matt Coronado should give you 10 goals next year. If Matt Coronado plays 65 games at the NHL level and he can't give you 10 goals, that's a cause for concern. I think Coronado will be a useful player. How useful remains to be seen, but he should be able to give you 10 goals at the NHL level next year. He's a point-per-game player in the A. If he's half of that in the NHL, he should be able to hit the ratio he needs to help make up that deficit. And then it's guys like Chillington, who defensemen are hard. Maybe he can give you 4 or 5, but that'll help you chip away, but that's not making a huge dent. And then Miramonov, maybe he gives you something in the ballpark of 5 to 10. You know, he's got 2 in a handful of games he's played as a Flame. And then past that, you know, Kevin Rooney, he's not giving you a lot. Maybe he gives you 3 instead of 2 or 4 instead of 2. That's not going to help you a ton. Peltier, similar to Coronado, you would like 10 goals at the NHL level from Peltier next season. The Flames are still probably going to need to find themselves another 20 goals, realistically, that are not currently in the organization. If the Flames would like to make the playoffs next season, they're going to need to find something in the ballpark of 20 more goals. That doesn't sound like a lot. Hell, that might just be one guy if the right situation arises where the right free agent comes about. But we don't know if the Flames' goal is going to be to make the playoffs next season, which is why this is a fun exercise. Can the Flames overachieve with a younger supporting cast? Maybe somebody we're not expecting makes a leap. Maybe Coronado pushes 20 instead of 10. Maybe Peltier pushes 15 or 20 as opposed to 10. And then, I'm just saying, the math isn't that hard. We're only talking about a handful more goals from a few guys. We're talking about you're going to need 260 conservatively goals to make the playoffs. The Flames are going to finish with 250 this season. If you safely want to make the playoffs, you probably need 270. You need to find something in the ballpark of 20 goals. Where can you find 20 goals? Your young guys, and maybe, just maybe, tweaking your usage of your veterans just a smidge. But that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Flames. I want to thank everybody who made it all the way through. If you could be so kind to leave the show a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and hit that subscribe button and the like button over on YouTube, that would be so, so kind. I will be back tomorrow. If Jess's voice is back tomorrow, she'll see you guys then.